Hello, my name is Jared Ludlow, Publications Director at the BYU Religious Studies Center, your weekly resource for gospel scholarship. Today I'm joined by Becca Black, who's our video editor here in the RSC, one of our student interns. And today we'll be talking about some possible resources that can accompany your Come Follow Me reading for May 22nd through 28th. We're going to talk about a couple of articles that are related to Joseph Smith Matthew, which is found in the Pearl of Great Price, but which is a version of Matthew chapter 24. And so it goes along with today's reading in Come Follow Me. The first one is called Prophecies and Promises of Joseph Smith Matthew by Kelly Ogden, a former religion faculty member here at BYU, and it comes from a religious educator article. And he starts off just pointing out that the prophet Joseph Smith emphasized Matthew 24 more than any other chapter in the New Testament. And he made more changes in its text than in any other for the Joseph Smith translation. In fact, this revision contains 33% more material than Matthew 24 in the Bible. So, Becca, what was something that stood out to you from this article?
Yeah, I liked specifically there was a part kind of near the beginning where it mentioned the idea of ways to prepare for the second coming. And there was a specific quote, I could be saying this kind of wrong, but it was panic is not part of the gospel. And that kind of relates to how people worry a lot about God's judgment and life after death. But specifically, this article was talking about people worrying about the types of things that are foretold for the second coming, and the scriptures are meant to help us prepare for this kind of thing. And so by studying the scriptures and living the gospels, we know that we don't have to fear because we can be prepared for what lies ahead. And I found that was really comforting to know, just because everyone's kind of scared of like life after death, and especially hearing about like the signs of the times in the scriptures, we're all just like, oh no, what's going to happen? Are we all going to like die? So yeah, just hearing that like through living the gospel we can really um, get to that point where we can at least be like comforted. It felt really nice to read that.
Yeah, because in this chapter in Matthew 24, Jesus is addressing signs of the future, some of
Mm-hmm.
which are going to happen just shortly after his own death, but then some related to second coming. And so for us, what we are probably most concerned about is now what are the signs related to his return? And so in this article, Brother Ogden breaks down that the first 11 verses talk about the first decades after Jesus, basically AD 33 to 70. Then verses 12 through 20 talk specifically about the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem and some of the events associated with that. But then most of the rest of the chapter, starting in verse 21 to the end, it's about the restoration and the second coming and so forth. And so a lot of the things you were talking about. And so he just goes through and gives a verse by verse commentary, basically, of this chapter and how they relate to different historical events or future prophesied events. And one line that I like that he said is that all of this was to prepare us, not to scare us. Kind of like what you
Yeah.
had said before, not to panic. Now, the second article is called Joseph Smith Matthew, Profiting from Prophecy. It's by George Horton, a former religion faculty member here at BYU. And it comes from a volume called The Pearl of Great Price, Revelations from God. And in this, he starts off talking about Jerusalem, since that's the location of Matthew 24. And he talks about how there's no spot on earth that has witnessed such pangs or been the scene of so much carnage, bloodshed, and sorrow as Jerusalem, the holy city. And he talks about how Jerusalem from Jesus's time was left in ruins, and the prophecy that Jesus made in this chapter, there's not one stone of the temple left upon another, certainly came to pass because there's
Mm-hmm.
nothing left of the temple there. And then he goes on and he'll talk about how these different prophecies apply and so forth. But what did you learn from this article?
Oh yeah, just adding on to what you said, basically, I thought it was really interesting that this whole article kind of related back to the first one, but specifically, it was more so telling us about how to heed the warnings of the Lord. So, specifically speaking on the importance of these types of prophecies. As you mentioned, the idea of like the stones of the temple completely falling down. It's interesting. The article mentioned that Jesus said that like 3 decades before it actually happened, which is so interesting to me. And then also later on in the article, it mentioned something about the conditional nature of prophecy, saying that it doesn't have to happen. So, like the calamities, as it says, can be avoided, as seen in the story of Nineveh. However, for the second coming specifically, which is what these two articles are kind of going on about, it says that this prophecy is one that will come to pass. But again, if we do the things that the prophets and the scriptures tell us, like reading the scriptures, attending church, and just trying to like stay strong in our faith and keep that foundation, then we don't have to worry as much. We don't have to be afraid of what the future may hold.
Good.
Yeah.
And so some of those things are things that prophecy mentions, that we need to stand in holy places, right?
Mm-hmm.
That seems to be a key part that he mentions in this article. So yeah, he talks a lot about the prophecy, about other examples of prophecy, the conditional nature, as you mentioned, of prophecy, um, that we are going to experience some calamities. What's going to happen if we disregard prophecy? Why do we have prophecy, and what can we profit from this prophecy specifically? And he kind of gives a list that I thought was interesting related to this, that apply to us in our day. One, calamities will come. Two, the Savior will return. Three, we do not know the day or the hour of these occurrences. Four, therefore we must prepare. Five, we must not allow ourselves to be deceived. And finally, six, we must guard against complacency. So those are things we can think about and prepare for as we await the glorious return of Jesus Christ.